It's really a shame that this show is so obscure. It never got a season two, it never got a reboot. The novels it was based on never got translated and released in North America. It's really sad actually because I quite enjoyed this show and I really would have liked to see what happens next. Even the wiki is very sparse, and I was trying to find spoilers for it, and I pretty much couldn't. The only reason I know that Titania even exists is back in university, a friend of mine recommended it to me, and I just had never gotten around to watching it. However, I recently finished The Heroic Legend of Arslan, and I liked that a lot. So I said, you know what else has Yoshiki Takanaka made? Obviously, he's also made Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which I'll watch at some point. But he also did Titania, and I'm like, you know what? This is a lot shorter. This is only, like 26 episodes. It's a space opera, which is one of my favorite genres. It's made by Yoshiki Takanaka. You know what? Let's take a watch. And I watched it and I really enjoyed it. And I just, as I'm watching it, I'm trying to puzzle why it's so obscure. And if you look at like various review sites, it always gets a very mediocre rating, like 6.5, 6.6, 6.7, something like that. Whereas I think it's much better than that, and it's much better than stuff that's placed at a similar level to it. My best guess is it just wasn't able to find an audience. And my guess for that is because it's a Western space opera, very much not Western as in Wild West, but Western as in the kind of thing you'd expect to come out of America or the UK or something like that. In that it's very reminiscent of Babylon 5, of Dune, Star Trek, Star Wars, that kind of thing. It even more has that vibe than any sort of anime vibe. So maybe the issue is that just didn't appeal to anime fans, and because it was an anime, it didn't appeal to space opera fans, and so it just kind of languished in obscurity. But if you're willing to look past all that obscurity, it's a very good show. I think more than most things I've watched, it does a very good job of portraying the shades of gray within geopolitics, or in this case, galactic politics. That oftentimes, like I said, there's shades of gray. There's not always a absolute good guy and an absolute bad guy. The show does assert that there are good people and there are bad people, but good people are often forced to serve bad causes, and bad people are often forced to serve good causes. It also raises a lot of questions about freedom versus order. Do the ends justify the means? And various things like that. So, over the whole, I think it's a very interesting show from a political perspective, as well as a just being a good science fiction show. So, what is Titania about? In the far future, mankind is scattered across the galaxy, with most of humanity. I'm not sure if it's most of humanity or just a plurality of humanity is under control of the Empire of Eldana. Which is ruled by an emperor, but is really controlled from the shadows by the Titania clan. Now, the Titania clan is led by the Landless Lord, and theoretically they don't control any territory with the exception of their floating palace space station, but they are in fact a galactic empire that has its own fleets, its own soldiers, that has garrisons on numerous worlds, that has near total control of all interspace commerce, diplomacy, and information. The Emperor himself is basically a puppet. It's very similar to the situation the Emperor of Japan was in, with the Landless Lord acting as kind of a shogun. Even in one of the first episodes, the Emperor tries to assert some of his independence by appointing an anti-Titania prime minister, but he just gets framed for treason and shot in like the first episode, and he's placed under surveillance. Now, there's an immense amount of resentment towards Titania throughout the galaxy. Planets basically just have to do whatever they tell them to do. All trade, there's taxes and tariffs and stuff that have to go to Titania. Everything requires them to rubber stamp it. It's led to a very stable but static system where there's little growth or change. But the show also does propose that this is Pax Titania. This is similar to Pax Britannia or Pax Americana or Pax Romana or Pax Mongolia, in which one power has become so dominant it's resulted in a great deal of stability. As far as we can tell, interplanetary war barely exists in this galaxy. Trade between worlds is well regulated, and living standards vary but don't seem to be horrific. Even if Titania is omnipresent, most of the time it's just kind of in the background and it's just an accepted part of life. You pay whatever tariffs or taxes they ask for. If they make a specific request of you, you do what you're told. But beyond that, they're kind of in the background. Now, some members of them are more benevolent and some of them are more cruel. So they kind of span the spectrum from lawful evil to lawful good, although mostly they're in the lawful neutral group, I would say. So whether Titania is good or bad, or the galactic order that they've created is good or bad, is really a matter of opinion. As I said, we aren't really told specifically one way or the other, because there is stability, there is a lack of war, there is peace, there is relative prosperity. But Titania, like I said, is an extremely indifferent and often arbitrary master. If they want something, like a new piece of technology, if there's a profitable mine, if they want a work of art or something, they will just grab it. They will just grab it, and if they try to resist, they will make an example out of you and they will blow your whole planet up. They'll destroy planets to try to get one person they're after. Beyond the maintenance of their own power and the galactic order that they've implemented, the clan as a whole doesn't really care about the well-being of the people of the galaxy one way or another. So you can see this as a good thing or a bad thing, because in a lot of sci-fi things we see constant war, we see genocide, we see pirates roaming everywhere and stuff like that. That doesn't exist in this universe, but all of the governments are basically puppets to the one family, which is kind of interesting. So within the show we have Ajman, however you pronounce it, who is the landless lord and the current head of Titania. He's getting old and he has to choose his successor, and there's 4 dukes who are the 4 kind of leaders of the different parts of Titania. He doesn't have a son himself, so he's trying to pick who his successor is going to be, and they all have very different personalities. My favorite, of course, Duke Jocelyn Titania, is very much a lawful good character. He's very polite, he's kind, he's courteous, he always tries to resolve situations in a way where both sides gain. He tends to believe that Titania should use its immense power and resources to be a force of good and to help, kind of a very paternalistic, help uplift the galaxy, not just be feared but also be loved kind of mentality. We have Idris, who is the youngest of the 4, who is a schemer who is always kind of playing ops from behind the scenes, who wants to accede to the throne of the landless lord through manipulation. We have Ariabert, who I think is the least developed of the 4. He loses in the first episode and he's just very prissy, and that's pretty much all we really get out of him. And then we have Zarlish, who is, I think, kind of embodies more of the lawful evil side of Titania. He's a brute of a man who's only interested in fighting and destruction. And his immediate response to any situation is just to blow things up, to level planets, to just engage a complete and total annihilation of whatever he feels is standing in his path. And so the Duke is trying to figure out, or rather the Landless Lord is trying to figure out which one of these men is going to succeed him. And throughout the thing, they're very much trying to one-up each other. They're trying to complete tasks for him, to do it with style, to do it efficiently, in hopes that they'll be the one to succeed him as Landless Lord. So we have that kind of aspect to it. We have 4 very different characters who are all kind of working against each other and scheming. And to me, that right off the bat sets up an interesting dynamic. It's also interesting that they embody kind of different aspects of the order that Titania has created. Now, the plot itself really starts out when Ariabert Titania is set to invade the planet of Uria, which has invented, I believe it was a new agricultural technology or something like that. But Titania has decided they're going to invade it. There are neutral planets or planets that are not subjugated to Titania. They've made a deal with the government that they're just going to basically throw the invasion. They're just going to throw their fleet into battle with no preparation. They're all going to get killed. They're going to surrender, and the people from the previous government are going to get jobs in the new Titania administration. And to that end, they make a largely unknown officer, Von Hulick, the admiral and commander of the fleet. And to the surprise of everyone, he manages to defeat Titania. He gets these, I forget what they're called, but they're these really powerful cannons that fire an immense beam and then explode. So they've never really been used because it's kind of a problem if your weapons explode and they aren't very mobile. But what he wound up doing was he lured Titania in to attack his fleet, and then they move out of the way and these cannons go off and devastate them. And this is the first battle that Titania's lost in hundreds of years. It's a complete and total disaster. While losing the one fleet kind of sucked, it was only like a small fraction of the total power they had at their control. What matters more is their reputation was damaged. They were shown to be beatable. They were shown to be fallible. That this kind of crappy little planet that nobody cared about was able to stand up to them and win. And so it sets off kind of a chain of events wherein all the kind of vultures and all the people who had been hiding in Titania's shadow start coming out of the woodwork to try to take advantage of it. You have a whole bunch of exiles and fugitives and people from kingdoms that Titania has destroyed. You have various branches of the family. You have other political figures. And so everybody is kind of scheming against each other and trying to take advantage of the situation. Meanwhile, Titania itself is struggling to maintain control in the face of this unexpected challenge. So much of the series is Von Hulick, who gets exiled after winning the battle, to Titania trying to chase him down. He keeps running from planet to planet. He keeps running into resistance fighters who want him to lead them, and he keeps telling them it's pointless to fight Titania. I only won because of a very specific circumstance. It's not going to happen again. I'm not interested in dying. He even says to the rebels at some point, do you think the average person will thank you if you bring Titania down? And the peace in the galaxy will come to an end. And so a lot of the show is his character arc of gradually kind of coming to terms with the fact that he can't really stay neutral in this, that he has to pick a side, that Titania will never leave him alone, that if he wants to survive and he wants kind of the ideals that he believes in, which tend to be freedom to survive, then he's going to have to face Titania directly. And what kind of cements it is there is a resistance fighter who's trying to restore their kingdom, who he meets early on, and he immediately falls in love with her, and he thinks about her constantly, and Titania winds up killing her to get to him. And he kind of goes through an existential crisis, and he just kind of realizes that, no, I'm going to have to fight against Titania. I'm going to have to try to create the new galaxy for her and for all the other people who have just kind of gotten trampled by the wayside. As he puts it, I want to see what a galaxy without Titania, without central control, looks like. Now, this show was made before the novel series was actually over. So I guess they had two options. They could either just end it on a, not necessarily a cliffhanger, but just end it on an ambiguous note, or they could make a gecko ending and try to come up with their own ending and it be a complete and total disaster. Fortunately, in this case, they decided to go with the former. So, spoiler alert, I guess, how it winds up ending is Zarlish Titania becomes obsessed with capturing Von Hulick, because Von Hulick keeps foiling him and was responsible for the death of his brother. And he kind of recklessly goes after Von with some of the resistance fighters. And we get probably what is the campiest scene in this entire show, where a bunch of guys just shoot him and he just seems to be completely unaffected by the gunfire. And they're fighting in like a an area with no oxygen, and he's somehow able to survive that. And it's just complete camp, but they eventually bring him down. So the show ends with his funeral, with just on a very ambiguous note. They don't get Von Hewlick. He's escaped. He's still determined to fight Titania. Titania has been shaken, but they're in no way in danger of collapse. They're still very much in control of the galaxy. They've even managed to defeat a lot of their enemies who have popped up throughout this. So they've survived, and it kind of leaves us with kind of a chess game half played. Neither side really has an advantage. Both sides have gotten a bloody nose, but we really have no idea where it could go from there. It could result in a total Titania victory, or it could result in them losing power and collapsing, which I kind of like, actually. I much prefer that to it having just some rushed ending they made up just for the anime. That's very unsatisfying. Especially since by like the later episodes, it's very clear this show's nowhere near wrapping up the main story. So what they did is they wrapped up the main plot arc that they were doing with the death of Zarlish and that whole thing, and then they ended it there. And I thought that was a very good place to stop, especially if they were not going to be getting another season. Beyond that, I just think the show is good in general. There's a lot of good characters. I think the writing's pretty consistently good. A lot of the space environments are pretty cool. There's not too much about the specifics of the ships, but they look okay, I guess. Overall, I just think it's a very solid sci-fi space opera. If the books had been released in North America, I probably would have read them. If there had been a season 2 of this, I would have been delighted to watch it. It's something that I wish would get a reboot, that someone would do another adaptation and do the full story. Because like I said, I can't even find really spoilers online. The wiki is threadbare, and I can't like find spoilers, like I said, or translated versions. So I really want to know how it ends. But that's not even really seemed to be available. So I guess it's going to remain a mystery unless I want to machine translate the novels and try to figure it out from there. I don't think the manga covered the entirety of the story. No, it didn't, because the story the last novel was published in 2015, and the last manga volume was published in 2011. So the manga wouldn't end the story either, much like the anime. So I would recommend watching this if you like sci-fi, if you like space opera, if you like political anime or stuff like that. Definitely give this one a check out. Underrated gem. Very much recommend it.